Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers, for another episode of Gates of Goodness. I am your host, Youssef Kromah, where every night during this blessed month of Ramadan, we will be seeking gates of goodness in hopes to increase our nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and become active members of society and maximize our blessings in this month of Ramadan. Now, today we'll be discussing the very pertinent topic of seeking knowledge. What is knowledge? Why is it very important to seek it? What are the benefits? How does it benefit us as well as the broader society at large? Before getting too deeply into our subject, I would like to introduce our honored and noble guest all the way from Dearborn, Michigan, Sheikh Suleiman Hani. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Please stop exaggerating my title every single time. I am from Dearborn, Michigan. I say that proudly. Today, actually, I have this little pocket square. And I'm mentioning this because it was given to me by brother Youssef yesterday as a gift, even though I know he really loves it. Jazakallahu khairan. I wear this with pride. Jazakallahu khairan.
Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. May Allah provide me one in Jannah as well.
In this world as well.
I want to be fresh in Jannah now. Inshallah. Make it. Brother Idris, I would like to introduce our very honored guest and veteran of the show, Brother Idris Sora. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As always, I look forward to it and hopefully we'll have a wonderful show, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Last but not least, one of my favorite guests, Brother Amr. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I'm AKA Amr ibn As.
Yeah, I love this nickname.
Alhamdulillah. So we're going to get right into our subject, Sheikh. The topic is the importance of knowledge and education. So we're going to begin by mentioning some of the merits of seeking knowledge in Islam.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. SubhanAllah, with every topic that we have, we can say the same thing. There is so much we can say about it, and there's a big treasure of knowledge that we can take from this discussion. And perhaps the very first thing we can say is that if you look in the Quran, you see that the Prophet ﷺ, he was never commanded to ask for more of anything except knowledge. وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, and say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. But nowhere else in the Quran do you find a command to the Prophet ﷺ to ask for more of anything at all. And this shows us the value and the rank and the status of knowledge. There are other verses as well. For example, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Say, do those who have knowledge, are they equal or equivalent to those who do not? Meaning there is no comparison between the two. People who have knowledge, people who do not. Now some of the scholars, when they studied the Quran and they taught it, especially the tafsir of the Quran, they said that knowledge, when it's being mentioned in the Quran, is referring to knowledge related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our knowledge of Allah, our religious knowledge, our beneficial knowledge, anything that's useful for us. And the Prophet ﷺ, he would make this dua frequently. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a wa rizqan tayyiba wa amalan mutaqabbala. Oh Allah, I ask you for knowledge that is beneficial, sustenance that is pure, and deeds that are accepted. And this is a dua, maybe this is our first action item of the show. People are listening in live and later on, inshallah ta'ala, can implement this dua. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a wa rizqan tayyiba wa amalan mutaqabbala. Making this dua all the time. It's a very beautiful dua. It covers a lot of things that we're not going to be discussing right now, inshallah. But with regards to knowledge, the best thing we can say to summarize it is that it will change your life. Seeking knowledge sincerely will change a person's life, especially when they internalize it and they study it in a structured way, and they study the priority things first before the other aspects. Anybody who studied anything at all knows this, and they've experienced this, that the more you study, the more you realize how much you've changed. You've matured, not just with regards to this life, but you've matured a lot spiritually, and you've changed in your perspective of many things. So knowledge brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the proof of that is the verse, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Verily those who fear Allah the most are those who have most knowledge of Him. And this again is not outwardly knowledge. It's not saying, hey, I memorized all of these texts and I studied all of these under these scholars. Rather, it's the knowledge that you do have of these things, but it's internalized. Because without internalizing knowledge and acting upon it, it's not really beneficial for us. So again, the best thing we can say, and I believe this could become a very open discussion, inshallah, is that knowledge will change us in so many ways. And we can discuss some of the ways in which knowledge protects us and changes us. Perhaps Brother Idris or Brother Amr.
For me, I would say knowledge will changes you in the sense that it helps you come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It helps you to find a peace within you that you wouldn't know or understand before that. It gives you insight and makes your dealings with people in this dunya easier than without it. As anything, I think people sometimes they look at it as a specialized thing that they're not really like interested in doing it. But I always ask them. I said, "Did you go to school? Did you go to college? Why did you do it? You did it for a reason, right? You had a purpose." This same thing should be said about Islamic knowledge.
So here's something we can add to that, because maybe a lot of viewers who just tune in or people who watch this later are probably expecting this to be about seeking knowledge in an intensive way or going to study somewhere for a long period of time. So maybe before we mention some of the other benefits, we can clarify that Islamic knowledge, as almost all the scholars have said, this is something everyone needs to know, is regardless of where you are spiritually, you might feel like you're the worst Muslim ever. Or you might feel like you're doing things properly and you should never feel safe. But you might feel like you have the foundations down or you've learned the foundations of Islam. But when it comes to religious knowledge, it's for everyone. It's for everyone. There are different approaches, there are different steps, and some people need baby steps, that's fine. But it's for everyone and it's a lifelong task. So one of the scholars said, seeking knowledge does not end until the day you die. Now somebody who hears that might say, well, I can't realistically do that on a daily basis. I have a life, I have schedule. Here's the thing, it takes a priority because of all these benefits that we're going to be discussing inshallah ta'ala. And it's not just a priority, rather when we know that it's a lifelong mission, it's like any other ibadah. You don't say to yourself, well, I got work, I can't pray 5 times a day for the rest of my life. No, you will still find a way to do it. And so the reality is, if you know this and you realize this and you acknowledge it and you believe in it, then the next step is, how will I fit this into my daily life? And there are so many easy ways to especially in our times with technology, there are so many easy ways to incorporate seeking knowledge, even if it's 5-10 minutes a day, seeking knowledge with everything else that we do in our lives. You know, something funny that I researched, because I had to give a lecture on smartphone addiction. And this was at a convention, and some of the viewers might have already been to that conference, that lecture, and it was a very big lecture, alhamdulillah, there were many people. And of course, there were a lot of Apple users, unfortunately, but alhamdulillah, Allah's guiding them. I'm just kidding. So one of the questions we asked is, how many times a day do you think you check your smartphone? And this is a question maybe I can ask you guys as well. And some of our live viewers, ask yourself this question. How many times a day for people who have smartphones do you think you check your smartphone?
Like 1,000 times.
Lots.
1,000 times, mashallah. That's on the higher end.
I would say like 100 times or something.
100 times? How about you, brothers?
I would probably say about 15, 20 times a day.
The entire day?
I'm too busy to
MashaAllah,
keep
that's
checking
amazing.
it more
Because
than
most
that.
people say, so here's an example. So most people say, as soon as you check the time on your phone, as soon as you do anything at all, it's considered, one check of your phone. So they took an average of 5,000 people, which is a pretty big sample size, and they said, on average, American smartphone users check their phones 150 times a day on average. Some people are below that, some people are way above that. So here's something interesting. If you are opening your phone up 150 times a day, you're checking your phone, at the very least, don't you think, for somebody who has no time whatsoever to seek knowledge in their perception, imagine they open up one Islamic app, or a PDF, or just the Quran app, out of 150 times just once, and they read something for 3 to 4 minutes. Now what I'm saying is, this is the very, very minimum. If they do this every single day, 10 minutes a day for the entire year, that's 3,650 minutes. Now when you add this up, you're like, oh, it's a lot bigger than just 10 minutes a day. So the point I'm trying to make is, we have the time, but we have to be willing to believe in what we are seeking. Because the more you believe in something, you'll find a way to do it. And when they say, where there's a will, there's a way, it holds so much truth. Because a lot of people will say, I simply don't have time. And then when something happens, suddenly they find time.
Exactly.
Whether it's waking up 10 minutes earlier or sleeping 10 minutes later, they'll find time for whatever it is that they put as a top priority in their lives. So now we can move on to the questions of, as you mentioned, so some of the things that will make us basically believe in its importance, act upon its importance, and know that this is something valuable that will completely change your life. So what other ways do you guys feel, Brother knowledge will change a person's life?
Well, I think knowledge can bring you, first of all, any kind of knowledge, beneficial knowledge, will bring you closer to Allah. It will put you on the right path to Allah. Because if you think about it, if you're researching on or seeking knowledge in, for example, engineering or neurology or whatever field it is. So you will find like Allah exists in everything, like the miracles of Allah, the power of Allah exists in everything. So even if it's not the Islamic law, the Islamic knowledge that you're seeking, but it's a priority, of course.
Yes.
But any knowledge you're seeking as a Muslim, it will bring you closer to Allah. So this is one of the maybe one of the motivations to seek knowledge, because like these days we lack the motivation of seeking knowledge.
Yeah.
Like on the opposite, like the first word revealed in the Quran was Iqra. Seek knowledge, read. So it was a clear message to all Muslims that Islam is based on knowledge. It's a religion that you have, yes, exactly, a religion of knowledge. So you have to accept it based on knowledge. Don't just take it as that. No, think, rationalize things, like take it as, understand what you're taking. Seek knowledge before you accept things.
Yeah, subhanAllah. Jazakallah khairan. I want to add to that, which is that, so let us make a distinction here. You brought up a very good point. A lot of people will say, I want to study, I want to study, I want to study. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that, right? So as Muslims, actually, we're encouraged to study to the highest standards. I mean, as long as it's beneficial stuff. So when you're studying topics and subjects such as biology or physiology or physics or anything at all, you study it with good intentions and it'll make a difference. Now what you're doing is an act of worship, without doubt. So just to clarify, what we're referring to for the rest of the episode, inshallah ta'ala, is in regards to seeking the knowledge that will help you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. Now some people say these topics do, and that's very true, and they do. So what we want to talk about, for example, is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he said seeking knowledge is an obligation or a duty upon every Muslim. So somebody might say, what's the duty? How much do I have to study? You know, I'm not going to become a scholar. We're not all expected to become scholars. At the very least, you have to seek the basics, the basic understanding of how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, without doubt, this all begins with having the motivation and love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, studying the names and attributes of Allah. This is a very beautiful topic. When somebody starts to study who is Allah, and this is all like under, Tawheed, they start kind of being motivated on their own to study everything else.
Yeah, sure.
And that's the power-driven, that's the power-driven motivation that'll move somebody to study as much as they want or as much as possible. So you have the study of who is Allah, and then you have the study of how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so these are rulings. At the very least, every Muslim should study the basics of, how to pray properly. It's sad sometimes we see people, their entire lives, they've had the opportunities all around them, and they simply didn't bother to learn something very simple. And we're not criticizing or judging them, but rather you really have to hold yourself accountable to say, you know what, why didn't I learn this? It's something very basic. Learning how to pray is something every Muslim should know how to do. And there are a lot of people who say, I've never been taught by my parents. That's fine. You can learn, and there's so many resources, especially with the internet, as long as it's something that's credible, of course. You can learn, and you can take the steps necessary for you to get to where you want to be. But don't ever try to either shift the blame or justify what you're doing, and because that'll prevent you from ever learning. So you learn how to pray. You learn how to purify yourself properly. You learn how to do certain things that we deal with on a daily basis. And beyond that, you should try to learn as much as possible gradually. Now I'm talking about the very minimum, because everything else is going to be a little more advanced, without doubt. Yeah, brother.
I would say, just to add to that, I mean, praying is a minimum. There's no excuse for a Muslim who doesn't know how to pray in this day and age. Somebody somewhere can help you understand that. But I think even on a deeper level, I would encourage everyone to learn, not just learn the movements of prayer, because any monkey can go ahead and just move his arms and can do this. Yeah. I would encourage people to try to develop khushu in your prayer.
Absolutely.
Because then your prayer will have a purpose. It will do that which it's intended to do, not for you to lose weight or get up and stretch. It will do that which is intended to. It will change your heart and begin to mold you slowly but surely. This is the tarbiyah of Islam.
So tazkiyah or tarbiyah.
Yes.
So focusing on the internal self. I believe a lot of that, subhanAllah, is related to knowing who it is that you're praying to.
Yes.
You're praying to
Part
Allah
of it,
subhanahu wa
yes.
ta'ala.
Yeah.
So of course, tazkiyah. So I mean, there are many things we should be working on. So with regards to just fiqh, it should definitely be the prayer. Every Muslim should learn how to pray. There might be people who are new Muslims. They've never been given any opportunity. They don't know where to search online. They've seen many different things. There are people in circumstances who might have been raised in ways in which they never had the chance. And so, of course, we're not pushing anybody away. Rather, we're inviting them to take, the next step forward, especially in this blessed month of Ramadan. Take that next step forward in your prayer. Now, some people say, I know how to pray, but there are many mistakes in their prayer. So learn how to perfect your prayer as much as possible, not just with the movements, but internally as well. Because one of the biggest complaints that people have is, I know how to pray, but I don't feel anything.
Exactly. That's my point. Is
Yes.
that if you want to learn how to pray, learn what it's for, how it should affect you.
Right.
Because just
Prayer
doing the
is not just
movements, it's
yes.
not prayer.
Correct.
But most people, a lot of people think that just because they pray, that it's enough. But they don't feel it. They feel like it's a burden upon them,
Yes.
on their shoulder, that I have to pray Fajr, or I have to pray Isha, or they feel prayer is a burden. When you open up the seal of prayer, this burden is lifted from you,
That's true.
and Salah becomes a pleasure for you.
So, I don't want to shift the topic into prayer, but I'm going to give just one advice that basically it's very concise. When somebody says, how can I have more spirituality? How can I taste the sweetness of what I'm doing? And one of the best answers is, when you're praying, imagine it's your last prayer. Imagine it's really your last prayer. But don't just say, hey, it might be my last prayer. No, believe this is your last time to pray, let's say Salatul Isha. Now, if you really thought, and somebody came up to you and said, after you pray, the angel of death is coming to you, and this is your last prayer, you're probably going to have a lot of khushu' in Salah.
Yeah.
And that's the more you believe in it. And this is where faith comes in. It's the same as us always saying when we hear somebody has passed away or something bad has happened anywhere, a calamity, we say, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong, and to Him is our return. But how much do we believe that with our actions? Because it's easy to just say it. It's easy to post a Facebook status, shoot out a Twitter, anything at all. It's very easy. But then you have to act and believe that we are going to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, we don't want to shift too much into that area. So focusing on how to do acts of worship, and then focusing on basic rulings of things you deal with on an everyday basis. Because a lot of people say, I simply don't know. Learn. Go ask the people who do know. Ask the people who do know.
And that was going to be my next point, as Allah Ta'ala said in the Quran, فَاسْأَلْ أَحْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ.
No.
So if you don't know, the trend within our generation in particular, or just
Google.
Terrible.
Sheikh
We
Google.
have Sheikh Google, Dr. Bing. People, search the internet and they get these rulings about how to do things, and they get all confused. And traditionally in Islam, we have teachers.
Yes.
Books aren't teachers. The internet isn't a teacher.
Yes.
You sit down with a qualified teacher that's qualified about the subject that can teach you and guide you. Perhaps there's something that you may find in a book, but with a teacher, he'll give you a nuance of something or give you more insight on it. Books aren't bad, but they're not the beginning of seeking knowledge. A qualified teacher is the first step.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that we were going to move into is definitely that you don't want to make books your only source of knowledge.
Right.
Now, books are a huge part of it, without doubt. And anyone who doesn't like reading has to start liking reading or forcing themselves to read, because reading and having a connection to structured books in a series is very important. But more importantly is not to go online and look for your answers.
Right.
That one of the most destructive things that happens, a lot of the young passionate youth, they want to start learning about stuff, they go to specific websites, they get all these fatwa, they go around telling people what you're doing is haram. That fatwa is a very specific ruling for a specific situation.
Exactly.
This person behind the scenes, this young person, does not know anything about the usul, does not know anything about the situation, or how to give fatwa, or any of the other opinions that there are evidences and so on. And so learning should be done in a way in which you have a trusted scholar or local imam that has qualified knowledge, and you go to them and ask. And there's so many resources. As for learning without questioning, as for learning certain topics, there are entire video series now with full explanations from many scholars as well as people of knowledge. And there are books for certain topics that you can study on your own for certain things. But to go online and find specific individual fatwa and to take them out of context is extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. It's the same as someone opening up Sahih Bukhari and saying, I'm just going to study this and that's all my knowledge of Islam. I know somebody who actually left Islam after studying just hadith and he knew nothing else about Islam.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
He didn't have a strong aqidah, did not have a strong understanding of anything about Allah, did not have any understanding of fiqh or how to implement fiqh. So what he ended up doing was reading a hadith and not understanding the context, and he had the whispers of shaitan push him away from Islam. And now he's depressed and he's struggling, he's still not back, but he knows he's lost, subhanAllah. And so don't try to seek knowledge in the wrong ways. Definitely find trustworthy scholars that you can follow continuously, or people of knowledge, as well as books on certain topics that you can study as a series with regards to fiqh or purification of the soul and the heart, or books of compilation of hadith with commentary, such as Riyadus Salihin. I believe this is one of the best recommendations for old Muslims and new Muslims. Riyadus Salihin, studying it, the 2 volumes from beginning to end, extremely beneficial. Extremely beneficial. Now somebody might say, that's so basic. I'm saying this is one part of it.
Right.
Because this is a foundation. You need a foundation in Islam. And then you have to study the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a basic level as much as you can. Studying how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Studying a lot about good manners, al-adab al-mufrad, for example. Studying the Quran, tafsir of the Quran is very important.
Ibn Kathir is very beneficial.
Ibn Kathir is one of the most recommended tafsir of the Quran. Studying basics of hadith compilations such as the 40 of Nawawi or Riyadus Salihin. And the seerah is one of the most important topics to study. Seerah is one of the most important topics to study because a lot of Muslims, they say, I love the Prophet ﷺ, and they are probably genuine and sincere about it. But the more you love someone, the more you learn about him. This is the reality. Because you see people who follow celebrities, they follow actors or actresses, and they follow their every update on social media because they really love them. And so like this person might put up, I just ate pancakes with blueberries, and somebody's like, wow, like, share, and they're like going crazy about it. Who cares? They ate pancakes. Now, when you really love someone, you'll follow them. You'll learn about them. You think about them. You reference them with your everyday life.
Sure.
So studying the seerah is not just a sign that you truly love the Prophet ﷺ. It'll actually increase you in love for the Prophet ﷺ, which is an amazing aftermath. And there's an example I always give of a revert in the state of Michigan. When he first became Muslim, he was given only 3 books. So one of the books I gave him was Basics About Islam. Very small book. And then the second one was very basic book about prayer. And the third one was a very basic seerah book called When the Moon Split. It's a famous copy.
That book, man.
It's an amazing book.
I love that book.
And it's a good book for all Muslims. It's a very, very summarized book, very concise, to the point. So he finished the first 2 books. In 6 months, I saw him again. And the third book, he said, I still didn't finish it. So what happened? I'm surprised, like 6 months, you said you're an avid reader. Do you need help understanding the book? Because that's the easiest book I gave him, the seerah. And he said, no, I started reading it, and I fell so much in love with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that I didn't want to reach the end of the book where he passes away. And this is somebody who had just become Muslim.
Wow, subhanallah.
And then, subhanAllah, he did end up finishing it. And he said it broke down in tears. But my point is, you need all of these basics. All of us do need these basics. And then we start building on with more. We start building on with more. And in our times, we definitely need to focus on the spiritual purification that's internal. Because a lot of things have become very superficial. Our society now is moving towards superficiality, individualism, the outward, the appearance of everything, the beautification of everything, the modern contemporary, right? So what we need to do is focus a lot on the external and especially the internal. Because if you have perfected your external, it does not mean anything at all.
No.
It does not mean anything at all without the internal. And so you will be judged about the internal, about the heart, the state of your heart, and that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at. So knowledge will give you light for every type of darkness in this world. Every type of down that you feel, every type of depression that you go through. Knowledge will give you a shield against it and a cure for it. Knowledge will give you guidance for every type of misguidance in this world. So we see around us in society what happens, there's always new trends. People always come up with new ideas. And politics is moving towards social constructs, right? So things become accepted based on what the people say, hey, I think I should be able to do this with my life, right? And in the future, God forbid, there are already places where people are talking about bestiality and things like this. And so knowledge gives you guidance, divine guidance, for every type of misguidance. So it's a protection, it's a shield, and it's a weapon, and it's a tool, and it's a prevention from all types of deviance and harm. So knowledge will protect you from people, even within the religion, who start to innovate. People who start to go through different paths. People who start making cults and groups. It's us versus them. We're guided, everybody else is misguided, right? And we have all types of groups all around us, from the east to the west. And so knowledge will give you the security and the understanding, the conviction to understand what is correct and what is not correct. Knowledge will give you a cure for all types of illnesses, mental, emotional especially. And knowledge, most importantly, will protect you from the traps of the devils, protect you against going astray yourself. And knowledge is a sign of your gratitude to Allah that He guided you to Islam. And so what you're doing with that guidance is learning more about it. Because some of the scholars say, somebody will ask, I know a Muslim who left Islam. It's very rare for a practicing Muslim to leave Islam. It's very rare for a practicing, sincere Muslim to leave Islam. Either they were not sincere, or some scholars say they were not grateful for the blessing of guidance. They were not grateful for it. And they've been given so many opportunities and they became arrogant and prideful. And arrogance is the path of the devil himself, who knew that Allah was real, and yet he rejected the commandment of Allah. So knowledge does all of these things and so much more. It'll give us a light in our individual lives through all types of hardships and difficulties, and that light will help people around us. It will shine. It'll affect our families, our friends. It'll affect our manners, our external being, our humility, and it'll reach out to the whole world eventually. And that's the way it works internally and externally. Wallahu a'lam.
Alhamdulillah. So just in following that pursuit, there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, "Man yuridullahu khayr yafqahuhu fi din." That whoever Allah Ta'ala wants good for, that He blesses him with an understanding of the religion.
No.
So what are some other maybe narrations or some ayat? We know that Allah Ta'ala says He raises in darajah the person of knowledge. What are some, both in this world and in the akhirah? What are some narrations that you can mention?
So we can mention the hadith that's reported in Sunan Abi Dawud. It's a long narration about the one who sets upon a path to seek knowledge. Allah will make the path to Jannah easy for that person. Now every one of us wants our path to paradise to be made easier. This is one of the clear, explicit texts that tells us knowledge is that path.
Yeah.
And then you have, in the end of that narration, basically the angels lower their wings towards the student of knowledge and so on and so forth. Towards the end of the narration, something interesting, it's amazing, subhanAllah. The Prophet ﷺ says that the difference between the alim and the abid, the knowledgeable one, and the one who's just a devout, basic Muslim, just an average Muslim, the difference between these two in ranks is like the difference between myself and the lowest person in the ummah. Can you imagine the Prophet ﷺ and the lowest person in the ummah? So that's the difference between the one who has knowledge and the one who does not.
Allah.
In another narration, we mentioned that the path to Jannah becomes easier for them. In one narration, it's a long text. It has all the benefits of seeking knowledge in that regards, but this is all a reminder and a warning to the people who basically are not doing it for the right reasons. Because if you want blessings in your life, you want all of these benefits we talked about, knowledge has to be sought for the right reasons. And so there are many people who seek knowledge for worldly reasons, people who seek knowledge either for financial gain, for fame, or to be said or praised in ways of knowledge. This person is knowledgeable, mashallah. And we know from that long narration in Sahih Muslim that the first three people to be punished on the Day of Judgment with the hellfire, one of them is a person who outwardly was a scholar. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask this person, what did you do with the knowledge, the blessings that I gave you? He'll say, Ya Allah, I learned for your sake and I taught for your sake. And Allah will say to him, you have lied. You learned so that people will say you are knowledgeable. And you have gained your reward, meaning from the people. You wanted praise, you wanted fame, you got it. That's your reward for your intention. And this person will be thrown into the hellfire on the Day of Judgment. In one narration it says, and these will be the three types of people to kindle the hellfire first on the Day of Resurrection. So this hadith is always a cornerstone hadith as a reminder. Make sure you're seeking knowledge for the right reasons, never to show off, never for other people, never for fame, never for finances, anything else. You're doing it purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah to keep us sincere in all that we do.
Ameen, Allahumma ameen. This is a very, very crucial conversation. And we ask Allah Ta'ala to bless us with understanding and the sincerity to gain the reward of our intentions of seeking knowledge. Dear viewers, we're going to pause for a report pertaining to the topic of seeking knowledge, and we'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Al-Kindi was a prominent individual and a versatile genius in the history of the medieval Islamic Golden Age. He was known as the father of Islamic philosophy. The titles he earned were endless. Aside from being an Iraqi Arab Muslim philosopher, he was a polymath, great thinker due to extensive knowledge in many fields, mathematician and physician. His works in physics, philosophy, cosmology, mathematics, optics, cryptology, and medicine had a huge influence on later centuries and other civilizations of the world. Al-Kindi was from a noble Arab descent and was raised in Iraq under the patronage of science-loving Muslim caliphs. His childhood was spent in Kufa, where his father was a governor, yet he received his higher education in Baghdad. His attitude and keenness towards learning and education led him to be appointed to the House of Wisdom, Baytul Hikmah, an established center for translation of Greek philosophical and scientific texts. Aside from translations, Al-Kindi was well known for his calligraphy. The rise of different knowledgeable Muslim Abbasid caliphs had various impacts on his success. However, as the caliphs gradually changed in Baghdad, his star eventually waned until he died at the age of 72, being known as a lonely man. Unfortunately, succeeding his death, many of his works fell into obscurity or were lost, only to be resurfaced to Islamic scholars and historians of later times. Girolamo Cardano, the Italian Renaissance scholar, also known as the founder of probability and the establisher of binomial coefficients and theorems, considered Al-Kindi to be one of the great minds of the 12 greatest minds of the Middle Ages. Cardano translated many of his books to Latin and used them for his educational development. Al-Kindi wrote at least 260 books where he made important contributions to geometry, logic, physics, medicine, and philosophy. It was through Al-Kindi's systematic determination of the dosage of each medication that helped in the development of dosage standards, also known as prescription for patients. His contributions in medical and pharmaceutical disciplines led to the biggest hospital in present-day Baghdad to be named after him, the Al-Kindi General Hospital. He also contributed to mathematics by providing a foundation for modern arithmetic, spherical geometry, while assisting Al-Khwarizmi with astronomical studies. He was revealing teachings from the Holy Quran about God through logic and rationale. The Quran invites each and every individual to learn from nature, to reflect, to mold, and shape the environment so that they may absorb its wisdom. We shall show them our signs on the horizon and within their souls until it is manifest unto them that it is the truth. Surah Fussilat 41 to 53.
Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers, to our episode of Gates of Goodness. I'm your host, Youssef Kromah, and today we're discussing the very beneficial topic of seeking knowledge in Islam. Thus far, we've covered the benefits of seeking knowledge, its importance, how it benefits the individual as well as the society. Now we're going to move into the etiquettes of seeking knowledge. How does one go about seeking knowledge? Where do you start in terms of your forming yourself as a student of knowledge? What are some things that will be beneficial to you in learning and sitting with a teacher and things and such?
I believe one of the most important things, without doubt, we have to keep reminding ourselves when we are learning is to renew the internal intention. Because when you're learning, you might lose your drive, you might lose your dedication. Some people, mashallah, they start learning, or they might hear this topic today and they'll start learning something. And then they slowly kind of die out because there's no clear structure for them. So the most important thing is have a very strong intention, and you'll see the fruits of that strong intention. Allah will bless your efforts. Number two is when you are learning, don't ever learn just so you can argue with people. One of the worst things you can see is when young, passionate people go and learn about a topic so they can argue with either scholars or other people. Argumentation is not something we want. Just leave it. And the third is the second is people who learn so they can show off and basically have fame and praise. And the third are people who learn so they can put others down. So somebody will go learn something for the very first time. What does he do? He goes around to his family and his friends and community, and this is haram, this is haram, this is haram. He doesn't know how to teach people what he just learned, even though he had just learned it. He was ignorant of it like a day earlier. So remembering these three things, and then as for some of the etiquettes, when you go to the scholars, whether you're in person or you're watching them, when you're with the scholars, don't try to argue with the scholars. You know, some people go and the scholar will say something, and they might not say all the clear evidences. There are polite, wise ways to ask for certain evidences. There are polite ways to ask for elaboration and so on. Don't ever argue with a scholar. Have a lot of respect for them. The second is when you're with the scholar, don't fatwa shop. And don't ever tell a scholar that I heard another scholar say it's haram. Why are you telling me it's halal? Don't pit scholar against scholar with different opinions. They might hold different opinions that both have their valid evidences, but don't pit scholars against one another. It's not really a healthy thing to do. So some people, they'll hear something is haram and they'll go try to find somebody who says it's halal, right? and other people, you know, the opposite. And there's so many different types of scenarios that this has a lot of possibilities. Most importantly, we have to remember that when we're seeking knowledge, we try to encourage ourselves to act upon it as soon as possible.
Right.
So you learn something, and in our times we have so much information coming from all sources: phones, smartphones, you know, billboards, TV, advertisement, people, socializing, books. So we have to take notes. We have to write down at least bullet points. Something, when you hear something that's beneficial for you, write a bullet point. Because what usually happens is you'll forget, you know, 70, 80% of what you heard, and you'll remember the rest of it only if it's recalled, only if something reminds you of it. And so in the end of the day, you didn't really benefit. So the best thing to do is take notes as much as possible. Take notes when you're learning from scholars. Whether you're watching a video of a lecture or you're in front of a scholar, try to take notes as much as possible. Don't show, you know, any kind of disrespect, being distracted with other things. Give them your full undivided attention. And then another point is try to bring people with you. Try to have a gathering of people always wanting to learn. Surround yourself with people who love to grow. And for single people out there, marry somebody who does not want to remain the same for the rest of their lives. A lot of people say, no, they have to marry me as I am right now. I'm perfect. Or I'm not perfect, but they have to marry me as I am right now. I don't want to change for anybody. Don't marry somebody that doesn't want to change. That's extremely destructive and immature. Marry somebody who always wants to grow, wants to learn, because we all change. We all have room for improvement. So when it comes to knowledge, you look back at yourself after a year of learning something very basic or something advanced, and you see there's a lot of difference in your life. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. So learning consistently and wanting to grow is a huge motivation, especially when you have people around you, whether it's family or friends. And the last thing I'll mention before I hand it off to Amr or Idris is that when you're learning, you want to make sure that in your home there's an atmosphere of knowledge, and that it's something that's encouraged for everybody in the family. Whether they're as young as 4 and 5 years old, or they're the parents themselves or grandparents, there should be a source of knowledge at least on a weekly basis. You know, my father, alhamdulillah, when we were younger, he would always gather us for like a weekly family halaqah. And he would teach us some things, and we would discuss some things. But anytime we would go on trips, because a vacation is so fun by nature, by default, we would have to be memorizing like a hadith every day, like from Nawawi 40, or we'd have to be studying something intensively, or memorizing a surah in its entirety. He was always trying to encourage us to balance between the two. Whether it's your free time and knowledge, or whether it's studying in school, secular knowledge with a good intention, and also knowledge that will help you in your worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Balancing between the two. Because one of them is going to be there forever, whereas most of your studies are temporary, your school studies. So balancing between the two without any conflict whatsoever, and nobody ever saying something like, I don't need to study anything of this life. That doesn't really make sense. You know, we just saw the clip, the report, and we know of so many scholars of the past who mastered so many different sciences, including Islamic so-called sciences, right? So they've mastered many areas. It's unlikely we'll ever see scholars like that in our times. It's very rare, rather. So what we should encourage ourselves to do is have that as a standard, and try to focus on both the secular knowledges that'll help us help the ummah, help us understand more about the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regardless of what you're studying, and also the religious sciences in regards to how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala properly. And again, we need to try to master everything as best as possible, but don't try to split yourself or spread yourself too thin. Wallahu a'lam.
Now I want to get Brother Idris and Ahmed involved in this conversation. So what are some of the internal and external barriers that causes someone to refrain from seeking knowledge? Like someone to say, I'm not religious enough to study about the religion, or I'm not a scholar, I don't have any responsibilities to learn a religion. Or in certain places they'll tell women that women aren't supposed to learn Islamic knowledge, they're supposed to be in the kitchen and things like that, subjugate them. Those are all, you know, of course false, very false, and ignorant and counter towards Islam. But what are some barriers, internal and external, that causes people to stray from seeking knowledge?
For me, coming from the West, believe it or not, I find probably not the biggest, but one of the biggest barriers that I hear people always say is that they don't understand Arabic. A lot of people use this as Arabic, you know, I don't know Arabic, I don't know Quran, they use this as a crutch to not dive into studying. They use it as an excuse of why they're not doing what they're doing, as a barrier, as you said. Unfortunately, I think they don't realize that you don't have to know Arabic completely to study the deen in this day and age.
You know something very interesting, Idris? My teacher, before I came here, he was emphasizing on to me that knowledge is not in a particular place, it's where the people of knowledge are. And I never understood that until I got here and realized that many of the students who come from other countries, they're very learned before they come here. They exhaust all the resources within their country, and when they come here, they're just excelling on what they already learned before. But many people have this idea that I can't study any knowledge except I have to go overseas, I have to go to Egypt, I have to go to Saudi, I can't study except in a place abroad, when really that is counter to you know, and it sort of like undercuts the people of knowledge within our countries, because that's what they're there for. And they've already been through the processes, so they can give us a start. So when we get here, we're not starting from Alif Bata.
That's actually a very big barrier. A lot of people will say, I'm not going to go study overseas, so I'm not going to study at all. Whereas the reality is you have enough resources and people of knowledge all over the world, regardless of where you are. In the United States alone, just as an example, that's the only example I can personally give. In the United States, you have so many people who have studied properly, and they teach, for example, on a weekly basis, or they have institutes, they have organizations that teach. There's so many opportunities, but people are not willing to take that as an opportunity for knowledge. They think knowledge means you have to go study somewhere intensively for a long time. That's preferred and that's more in-depth, but it's not applicable to the masses, especially, you know, the family, the parents, the family members, somebody who is not able to travel or leave. You have resources all around you. And so everybody needs to look around and say, what resources will I take advantage of? Whether it's your local imam who has qualified knowledge, or an institute that comes to your community, or online you know, Islamic universities, without mentioning any by name. So there are so many opportunities that we can take advantage of.
I just wanted to add one other thing to the discussion about the etiquettes. Is the last thing I would say, that after doing a lot of the things that Suleiman mentioned, is that I would make sure that you're implementing the things that you learned. Because, of course, you can't implement everything. Some things are just theory and practice. But the things that you can, that you're able to implement, try implementing it in your life. Because this will turn your knowledge and you'll see the fruits of it. Like he said, if just learning it doesn't help you, you have to start implementing it. So this is a key to learning, is doing it. I mean, a doctor who goes to school and he graduates from the school, doesn't make him a great doctor. Would you prefer a doctor who just graduated from medical school, or one who's been practicing and doing it for 10 years? I prefer the one who's been doing it for 10 years. I don't know about you, but this is what the same thing. The same idea is that you start implementing it so that it affects you and start learning. You'll start seeing the wisdom of this knowledge and why it is not just theory only.
Inshallah. Dear viewers, I want to let you know that we have numbers on the screen that you can call in and contribute to this conversation if you would like. We look very much look forward to having you if you have any thing to contribute to this conversation, inshallah. I want to go to Amr and ask you, what are some internal and external barriers that cause people to stray away from seeking knowledge?
Well, the one that I can think about now is like when people think that we cannot master two fields of knowledge together, or two or three or four. Because when I think about it, when I was in the States, one of my professors said, asked us a question: do you know anything about the golden age of Islam? And everyone said no. And she said, a lot of inventions were made by Muslims, and as a Muslim person, I knew that these scientists were not only scientists in mathematics or medicine or engineering or whatever. They were scholars, they were engineers, they were mathematicians, they were doctors at the same time. So some people might say, I don't want to be a lawyer, I want to be an engineer. I don't want to specialize in Islamic knowledge, for example. They don't contradict. You can be both at the same time. And you can seek whatever field of knowledge you want and specialize on, and you can also seek knowledge in the Islamic knowledge because you need it to implement Islam to be a better Muslim. So they can go together in the same way. They don't contradict.
Actually, these end up being, subhanAllah, some of the most productive people for the Muslim Ummah.
Yes.
They end up being people who have mastered many areas, and they've also added to it studying Islamic knowledge. For me personally, I've seen a lot of, for example, I know of a couple of scholars who are also surgeons by practice, and they're still practicing, but they've memorized the entire Quran. They teach, and they've studied in depth, they've studied under scholars, and they go around teaching people. And the beautiful thing about that is that, you know, it's inspirational to people to see you doing so much at once. Now, there are going to be some cases in which we need certain people who have the strength which is 100% focused on all the different Islamic sciences, to focus on that area only, and then to start extending to other areas. But without doubt, we need a lot of people, especially the Muslims who are already specialized in all these different areas you mentioned, to start adding to that the greatest asset possible, which is religious knowledge. And that will make them priceless to the ummah. Wallahu a'lam.
Yeah, and just to add one note is that it's not uncommon nowadays to find someone who has a bachelor's in degree from a college in any field, accounting, whatever, and they also go on and have a bachelor's in Islamic studies. It's not uncommon these days.
That's very true.
I mean, not that they're going to be, fuqaha or anything. Of course, this is very rare. But it's not uncommon for people to do parallel things. They have a master's in this and they have a bachelor's in this, and it benefits them. People who do that are very productive in the world, and you find them more focused than the person who just went and got the BA in economics. You find that other person is more focused and more beneficial, usually.
Interestingly enough, one of the richest men, I believe, in Nigeria, in terms of businessmen, he was a graduate of Azhar. And and he studied and whatever, and then he went back and implemented his Islamic knowledge, and he used that to implement in his business. Alhamdulillah, he's one of the richest men. So,
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, it shows that you won't lose anything seeking the knowledge of Islam. You won't take any slight. Perhaps Allah Ta'ala may bless you in your other endeavors.
That's true.
And Islam is a religion that seeks to perfect everything we do, whether it's business, whether it's whatever you do. If you learn the proper principles, you will protect yourselves from sin.
So I think, I don't know if we have time to mention some practical steps.
Yes, we have about 5 minutes left, inshallah, so we're going to
So I'd love if we can give viewers action items, where to go from here. Because one of the most common questions I personally get, and I'm sure some of you as well, is where do I start? Where do I start seeking Islamic knowledge? Some people say, I want to start with an online university. I want to make this structured, because if I study on my own, I'm going to stop.
Right, sure.
Some people say, I want to study with my local imam or a particular institute. Some people will leave and go study somewhere else. Now, for the people who are not able to leave, for the people who want to start on their own, meaning they will supplement this with a scholar, a local imam or local scholar, which is extremely important, as we said before. Everyone needs teachers, not just a teacher, multiple teachers. Because it'll humble you, it'll remind you of things that you would never have learned through books. And most importantly, it'll teach you wisdom and experience that they've gained over the years that you will never find in any book. Because some people read and everything for them is black and white. Oh, this hadith says this, let's implement it. And they don't know anything at all about the understanding of the background or the context or how to use this. So the first thing is that people ask, where do I start? Start right now. Start right now. You have local scholars, you have online resources, you have online Islamic universities. Some of them are free of charge, actually. You have so many access to all types of books and things like this, and curriculums online. Go and ask somebody. If you're serious and you're sincere, you will start seeking knowledge. But more importantly is, and this will be step number 2, set a goal for yourself. So now in Ramadan, by next Ramadan, what do you want to have achieved in knowledge? What areas do you want to have studied? Somebody might say, I want to learn as much as possible about tafsir. Start making yourself goals, because we need SMART goals, as they say in business school. Specific goal. Give yourself something clear. Don't say, I just want to learn more. What do you want to learn more of? How much of it do you want to learn? And what are you going to do to get to each milestone that will reach that point right there? Whether it's through an Islamic university that has a curriculum, or through a self-made curriculum with local imams and local scholars supplementing one another. And then number 4 is make knowledge an atmosphere in your home, as we said before. Make sure it's something you're always hearing lectures, your children are studying with one another. They're encouraged to study, not just for school and university, but for the akhirah as well. And again, there's no contradiction between the two. But you need them to study both sciences, right? So a lot of children are encouraged to become the best of this life, but their parents don't encourage anything at all when it comes to Islamic knowledge. And this is also not correct. Or they tell them maybe later. But later is not guaranteed, right? So we need to do all of these things as practical steps and make dua. Make dua on a daily basis. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'an wa rizqan tayyiba wa amalan mutaqabbala. We ask Allah to make us sincere and to open our hearts and our motivations to learn as much as possible.
MashaAllah. Dear viewers, we have a call coming in from Kuwait. Misbah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How are you, dear brother?
Alhamdulillah. I have a question. So the question is that nowadays you will find a lot of video on the YouTube, and this video is about the Islamic regulation, Islamic way of life. and also that Islamic manners and Islamic teaching. So the thing is that you will find some scholar is describing something, and you are beginning to like that lectures, and suddenly you will find that some other scholar who are telling that these and that scholar is not in the right path. They are deviant. So you should be very careful. So as a common Muslim, as a Muslim with very little knowledge, this is very difficult for us to distinguish the exact or the correct view of these speakers. And of course, the YouTube is now a very good source of knowledge and learning. So in this situation, what we can do? Can you just please give me a light in this respect? It will be very helpful. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, Sheikh Sulaiman, I'm going to ask you to answer very briefly, inshallah, as time's running out.
So I'm very glad, Jazakallah khairan, to our caller for bringing that up. That's actually a very important point, subhanAllah. We didn't end up having time to cover it, which is, this is my personal advice. Stay away from the people who, first of all, do not have qualifications. There are a lot of fake YouTube / social media scholars or so-called people of knowledge. Don't listen to people who don't have actual qualifications. Don't go to somebody who's just popular or has a following, but they have no qualifications whatsoever. The second thing is, stay away when you're seeking knowledge from the people who are trying to constantly attack and label other people. Because a real scholar knows and has the wisdom to teach you and motivate you towards good without really focusing on the bad of other people with personalities. Because we have a lot of fake people like this. All they do is criticize and attack others, and this person is deviant, this person is a liar, this person is misguided. Focus on the scholars who you see in their manners, first of all, like the manners of Imam al-Bukhari, who even when he talked about the fabricators of hadith, he was afraid to insult them with certain words and labels. So focus on these types of scholars. Don't waste your time with people who are fighting with different groups. Don't waste your time with people who are insulting and labeling one another. So when you have a qualified scholar, you won't run into this issue. But if you're going to somebody who's not really qualified, or in rare cases they're qualified but they have this issue where all they do is focus on labeling others, attacking others, don't waste your time with this. I urge the masses of Muslims. We have so many problems in our ummah right now. We have so many divisions, we have so many issues we're dealing with, we have so many people who are lost, we have so many people who lost hope. So what we need right now is to focus on the good, seeking knowledge properly, and not wasting our time distracting with who is deviant and who is not. We are not qualified to talk about these things, and we don't have the time to waste with our own lives, with our own ibadah, with our own shortcomings, to tell people who to listen to and who to not. There are very rare exceptions to this statement, in which a righteous scholar that the people know is righteous will tell you, be careful of listening to this ideology or this understanding. But it's very rare for a righteous scholar to specifically say, this person, ignore, this person, ignore, this person, ignore, this person is deviant, especially when they have no manners whatsoever. Again, it's a deeper issue than what I just said, but for the people who are newcomers or intermediate learners, don't waste your time with this stuff. Learn what you need to learn, focus on the good scholars, and keep moving forward, and asking Allah for clear guidance on the truth and allow you to practice it, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. Dear viewers, we reached that time again at the end of our show. Alhamdulillah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our intentions during this month of seeking knowledge, and to increase us in knowledge, and to help us to understand this religion. I'm your host, Youssef Kromah. This is another episode of Gates of Goodness, and we look forward to having you another night. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.